Hey, welcome to this episode of Classical Inc. I'm composer John M. Churchill. Today we're going to be discussing Debussy's Clair de Lune. Specifically, we're going to be talking about parallel major and minor keys and scales. I'm really excited about this because in the process of me studying the score, I learned a new perspective on thinking about parallel keys. So I'm really excited to share that with you. So let's get after it. All right, so like I said, we're going to be discussing parallel keys. So let's talk about what that is. So all that means is that our tonic, or our first note of the scale, is the same. So in this piece, tonic, or the first note, would be D flat. So what's interesting about parallel keys, though, is that the only thing they share in terms of their chord quality is the starting note. So once we get going, though we will have similar starting notes to some of the chords, all the chord qualities will be different. So for instance, the beginning in D flat major is D flat major, whereas the beginning in the parallel minor is going to be the minor counterpart. So what I'm going to do is put on the screen in front of you all 7 of the chords that make up D flat major. And I'll go ahead and discuss what those are. So we have D flat, E flat minor, F minor, G flat major, A flat major, B flat minor, C diminished, and then we're back to D flat. Now, the minor counterpart is going to be D flat minor. So we have D flat minor, we have E flat diminished, F flat major, G flat minor, A flat minor, B double flat major, C flat major, and then we're back to that D flat minor. Now, some of those chords in there are spelled real funky. So for instance, that B double flat, I'm going to discuss first why it's called that instead of A, because that note we traditionally know as A. I'll first discuss that, and then I'll discuss a better way of actually spelling it. So the reason that we call this B double flat is our A is already represented. When you have a scale, you need every note in the alphabet to be represented. So if we're in D flat minor, this is our D, this is our E, this is our F, even though that is F, it's F flat. This is our G, this is our A, so that means this is our B, and this is our C. Even though the natural notes, this is B and this is C, this is the B of the scale, this is the C of the scale. Typically, to make things easier, rather than spelling them like this, you use the sharp counter, the counterpoint there. So if I have D flat, it's also known as C sharp. So traditionally, it's actually spelled in C sharp minor instead of D flat minor. That way you don't have any weird spellings. However, in the score, during this section, Debussy does not spell it with the sharps. He spells it as an F flat major. So that's why when we're discussing this, we'll be using the flat counterpart in the beginning. So the cool thing about this, the reason that it gives Debussy such an ethereal feel is that he is stealing a chord from the parallel minor key and injecting it into the chord progression of the parallel major. So like I said, this song is in the key of D flat. So he actually really establishes it right here. That's one big D flat chord. And then it goes from there to an F minor. So far, so good, we're still in the key. But then from there, we go to this chord. And that, as I said, he spelled it as an F flat, but for all intents and purposes, that's an E major chord. So he is stealing a chord from a parallel key and then resolving it back into the parallel major. So it gives it a very otherworldly feel to steal a chord from a parallel key and put it in to the other. So when I was first studying this, I was really going to be analyzing this from the fact that there's a shared note. The whole time we have chords that have this note in it. So whether it's our D flat, our F minor, or that F flat major, we still have that note. But that's actually not the whole story of what's going on here. He actually could have gone to any of the 7 chords from the parallel minor key, and it still would have sounded correct. The reason he did it this way with that specific chord has to do with the melody that he wanted to play on top of it to make sense, but it could have given that otherworldly feel using any of the chords from the parallel minor key. Probably except for the first chord, because it wouldn't really give that punch to go from here to here. I'll play what I mean. So if the chord progression was this, then to the parallel minor, doesn't quite give the same feel. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that chord progression with every other chord that he didn't use in the parallel minor. So I'm going to start out with using what would be the second chord within the parallel minor. That would be an E flat diminished. We'll see how that resolves. So we have our first chord to our minor. Then if we go to that E flat diminished, it still resolves. Very, very interesting. So the next chord that we could have injected is the one he actually used, which is that E major, or F flat major, sorry. So the next chord within that key is going to be G flat minor. It will still work. Check it out. So interesting. And then again, we have our next one, which is going to be an A flat minor. And then we have that B double flat major, which is also known as an A major in the sharp key. And then finally, we have the C flat major, or B major if we're using the sharp key. They all have their own specific quality and sound in terms of how they resolve, but all of them work. It's so interesting how you can just steal a chord from the parallel key and inject it into the chord progression and resolve it on your tonic or your home chord, and it sounds right. It's so cool how he does that. Now, again, he decided to use the E major to resolve it, and I think that really had to do with the melody that he wanted to use. Now, just a quick note on parallel keys. It's very common that when you're playing a piece of music, typically it's divided into sections. And it's really common that when you get to a certain section, you actually modulate into the parallel key. That actually happens later in this piece, in this part. That's actually going into the parallel minor. And what's funny about this is that he actually spells it as the sharp key that time. And I think it really has to do for the ease of reading it, because there'd be a lot of double flats and weird, oddly spelled chords. But that just goes to show that he's really thinking about that parallel minor throughout the entire piece of music. And in fact, what's really weird about the end of this piece is that the resolution actually comes from that same chord. Because at the end of the piece, he's actually doing a bunch of those arpeggiated chords from that chord progression. And then the final chord, so at the end, he ends up actually, let's see if we can do this here. So that chord right before that final home chord at the end was still that parallel minor chord, which is a really interesting resolution, because typically if you're going to end something, it's much more common in classical music that you would use, say, like the dominant chord or another chord within your key to resolve, but he actually resolves from that parallel minor chord. Super fascinating stuff. So for anybody out there writing music, you might consider stealing from the parallel key just to inject another chord in there to give it another worldly feel. All right, well, I hope this was informative. Feel free to subscribe and remember to like and share. It really helps me out, and I'll see you next time.